180, 200. It was a long time, and it was after that long time that you made the taped statement, right? Right. And in that taped statement, you didn't make any reference to coming out of the bathroom and seeing Gary Carter holding a long white tube sock, did you? No, I didn't remember it. It had no significance at the time. In preparation for entering into a plea agreement, you had had an opportunity, had you not, to read the police reports. Yes, I did read them. And you discussed it with Mr. Beggarly. And you knew that Billy had been strangled with what appeared to be a long white tube sock. I got the tube sock from Detective Howard was the first to tell me that what instrument that was used. So at that time, you understood the significance of the long white tube sock. No, because I hadn't thought of anything until later on when I went up in my cell after I rehashed the whole entire story. Because in my first original statement, I said that John and Ray were having a deep conversation. Well, Ray was just standing there and he had a tube sock in his hand, and I didn't think anything of it. Now, if I would have known that he had a big rope, okay, like Bill was strangled with a rope, yeah, then that would have clicked, but I didn't think of it, and I held it in for a long time. I held that statement in for about 3 months because I was afraid it might be the deciding factor between one of those two getting the death penalty, and I didn't want to be responsible for that. So I didn't say anything at all. Finally, I did. You have indicated to a number of people that you would like to be able to do this entire sentence and let John off the hook. If I could. You love him pretty much. Yes, I do. In fact, he's the father of one of your children. Yes. Ms. Little, I want to jump back to when John was directing you where to drive to and telling you to turn into the turnout there. Do you recall if he told you to back in? No, I just drove straight in because. Did he tell you to back in? No. Did he tell you not to back in? He said, pull in here, is what he said to me. Do you recall making some comments in your taped statement about John saying to back in or not to back in? I might have, but I remember him saying, pull in here. Why would you have raised the subject of John telling you to back in or not to back in your taped statement? Objection. I would ask counsel to point out where she said this. Page 18. Which statement? The taped statement 42906. Thank you. Ask the question, counsel. I think the state has an objection. The objection is overruled. Thank you. Do you recall why during your taped interview with Detective Howard you would have discussed John having told you to back in or not to back in? I don't remember anything like that. Your Honor, I would interpose an objection and ask that her response be read pursuant to Evidence Rule 106. That's the way it should happen, counsel. Say again, that's the way it should happen. Well, I need to ask her about it first. Ms. Little, I'm handing you what's been marked for purposes of identification as exhibit number 251. Would you take a look at that and tell us if you recognize it? That's my statement that I made. And when you say the statement you made, that's the taped statement that you made on April 29th, 1996, right? That was after discussing this with Detective Howard for 2 hours, correct? Yes. Would you please turn to page 18? Are you on page 18? Do you find on page 18, about the middle of the page, you are asked, at some point, were you told to turn off? And you responded, yeah. Would you read your response? Pull in, that's exactly what I said. I see it says, and he said back in or not back in, but pull in. Excuse me, Ms. Little. Could you read your response to the question? Do you see which question I am looking at? That one right there. Right there, yes. Could you read that response? Just one moment, Ms. Little. Counsel, I would like you over here. Ms. Little, let me direct my questions a little bit, drawing your attention to 1, 2, 3, the fifth question down on page 18. Do you see where Detective Howard asks the question? At some point, were you told to turn off? Do you see that? Yeah. And did you answer as follows? Yes, I was. He said, stop here. John did. And, well, he said back in or not back in, but pull in. So I pointed the nose of the car to the left, and I left the car there and turned off the lights and left the motor. Is that inaccurate? Yes. Restatement of what you said? Yeah. Thank you. Ms. Little, isn't it true that when you get high on methamphetamine, that one of the things that you like to do is clean house? Yes. And in fact, your house is fastidiously clean, is it not? Yes. Does that suggest that you clean house a lot or that you are high on methamphetamine a lot? Both. And you had been high on methamphetamine for 2 or 3 days prior to Mr. Little's homicide. Is that correct? Correct, yes. You have also indicated that you shared your apartment with John Smith. Yes. And I take it then that he had clothing. Oh, yes. And you are aware, I assume, that John Smith wore white tube socks. Yes. And how many in the residence? Yes. Now, you have testified that moments after Billy got in the car, that Mr. Hartman, seated in the back behind the passenger seat, grabbed him and pulled him into the back. Is that correct? Was it your impression that in doing so, Mr. Hartman broke the passenger seat? That Bill did. That Bill did because he was being pulled by Mr. Hartman. When did you realize that was happening, that the seat was broken? No, because there was too much commotion going on, kicking and stuff and honking of the horn. How far over now that seat has a headrest on the top too, doesn't it? Right, and it's split in the middle with that thing that lays down. You mean the seat back is split in the middle? Right, so it's not very sturdy. It's not all one solid bench seat. Right, but what I was asking, does that passenger side of the seat have a headrest on top of the back of the seat? Yeah, I think it does. I can't be too sure. I haven't paid too much attention. I haven't been in that car too many times. Is it your testimony that when Mr. Carter pulled Billy over the top of the passenger side of the front seat, that he got his torso all the way in the back seat right away? What's torso? Torso, like from the waist up. Well, his waist would have been kind of like it wasn't all the way in the back, you know. He was just like leaning back like that, you know, and like his waist part was like up in the front seat with me. So probably, you know, but he was kicking and stuff, and he was like, you know, he wasn't laying flat out because the seat wasn't laying down. It was just busted and tilted back a little bit. You noticed that at the time? Well, I noticed that he wasn't laying down. I mean, because he was like, you know, that's why he was so high up, because his back was over the chair.